Welcome back to Daybreak. Now, let's move on to the next discussion on the program. According to the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalia Georgieva, at least one-third of the global economy may enter recession in 2023. This prediction was made on a recent CBS Sunday morning news program. Georgieva stated that the economic growth in China, the world's second-largest economy, is likely to be at or below global growth for the first time in 40 years due to uncertainty surrounding the surge in COVID-19 cases. The IMF also expects the U.S. economy to remain relatively strong, with a strong labor market helping to avoid an outright contraction. However, the IMF previously forecast a slower growth for the Nigerian economy in 2022 and a contraction in growth for sub-Saharan Africa due to the strength of the dollar and increased costs for imported goods. Now, joining us in the studio to talk about this is Kunle Adeni, a political and policy analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak. And also Tonye George, who is the head of research and education EQ Markets Global.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to Daybreak. We also have virtually joining us Aliyu Elias, who we expect to have give his own perspectives. Okay, he's here with us. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thank you. Gentlemen, we seem to have a big issue at hand, and I'm sure, I'm wondering how we should react to it. This warning by the IMF, we are already experiencing something that looks more like a recession already. And now IMF is saying this. I'm wondering, how bad can it really get? Let me start with you, George.
First we need to know what recession could be, and also the key indicators that we could look out for, that when it happens, we say, yes, we're in recession. Okay? So actually, recession is just a period where there is slow economic growth, slow economic activities, and downturns and the rest of them. And if you look at it worldwide, you notice that that is already happening. Okay? You see, throughout the whole of 2022, we had the stock market crashing and trading around rock bottoms. We had even in the US, employment rates was drastically reducing. In fact, the last the FOMC reported was 263,000, and that was really bad as compared to the performances of the previous months. So we see that all of these things are happening. We see a whole lot of there is consumption fear. A lot of people are not able to purchase goods as they would want to purchase. Looking at all of these things, for me, I would rather say we're already in recession, just that it has not been announced. Okay, so IMF coming up to say that we could probably have recession in 2023, I think it's something that we need to really look at. And if measures are not put in place to curb what is coming, to look at what is coming, it could get really bad.
All right, now, Kunle, let me come to you now. He just made a very valid point. We should take this thing seriously and measures should be put in place. Are we taking it seriously? Does it seem like we have these measures in place to actually take this challenge?
If you want to talk of Nigeria, I don't see how prepared we are, because when you talk about some of the factors, you also want to talk about the GDP growth rate, for instance. I mean, when you have a recession, there is a slow growth rate of the GDP for about 2 quarters consecutively, and that shows you that we are sliding into a recession. And of course, before I come to Nigeria, like you made reference to, we have seen how much of low capital investment we have seen in some countries. In fact, this could also be as a result of the fact that, don't forget, there was a global crisis that's talking about the pandemic, the COVID-19. I'm not sure how much of that countries have been able to recover from, because what we saw were more of aid packages being sent to ensure that the economy keeps moving. But how much of productivity did we see even after COVID-19? But we know that that's a major effect that we saw for Western countries. for the US. If you go to the UK, for instance, and this is me listing countries that could be largely affected as a result of this issue of recession that the IMF probably has given us the official notification of. Like you said, we are already in the recession, but now we are just being notified that we are going into the recession. So that's the IMF exactly. That's the IMF giving us the official notification. But if you look at what happened in the UK, for instance, you remember there were protests over the issue of increase in wage. I mean, some people saying their wage, their earnings were not commensurate with what was the level of work being done. That's talking about productivity. So when you have most of the labor unions, for instance, the workforce that should have been productive, not being active as a result of some of the strike actions, you know that that is going to affect the economy on the large scale. We saw one of the biggest strikes in the UK where rail workers, the nurses, and so you know that on the large scale it's going to affect the economic output. Coming back to Nigeria, yes, there was the pandemic, but there were different reasons that the pandemic came in, and for us, some people appear to have taken advantage of the pandemic situation as against finding solutions. Yes, the pandemic came, it disrupted a lot of activities, but we here back home, what did we do about it? And I have a lot of worry for Nigeria because how seriously are we taking it? I think for us in Nigeria, we should be taking it seriously because already we have a situation where our productivity level in this country is very low. We are more of a consumption-based country. So it's whatever these foreign countries give to us that we take. How much of local production do we see that ensures that we are exporting and we are generating the kind of revenue that we would need to actually sustain an economy like ours? Because if you're talking of recession, this is not the first time Nigeria is no stranger to the word recession. I mean, sometime, how many years ago, about 3 to 4 years ago, we entered the recession. And the question a lot of us have asked is, have we really gone out of that recession that we entered? Not to now talk of this one that the IMF is, because remember, when you talk about global recession, we have seen it in 2007 and in 2008, where the world faced this type of recession. We have also seen it in 2011. Now, the question is, what we saw then and what we are likely to see now, which is likely to be worse for us, and then do we have the measures that could really absorb us from whatever the dangers of this recession?
We have a head start when it comes to
exactly. So we've been warned now. The question is, what measures do we put in place to meet us? Exactly.
You know, right?
Talking about measures, sorry, let's bring in Aliyu Ilyas here into the conversation. Aliyu, I believe you can hear me. What lessons have we learned?
Right.
I mean, Kule talked about 2007 recession. It was global and it was massive, and we saw how the over-reliance on importation, led to huge impacts here in Nigeria. What lessons have we learned, and have we really adjusted in terms of increasing our production domestically?
All right, thank you so much. The facts remain that it's a global problem. We do have a 6% GDP globally, but when we come to 2022, we had 3.2, and now is expected to be 2.7 in the this current 2023. Now, the challenge is this: it's issues of energy issue, it's issue of supply chain, and it's issue of inflation itself. So if you look at it very, very well, it's a global problem. However, Nigeria would have been at a better place if we had worked on our shock absorber properly, having learned from COVID-19. The fact just remains that if you look at Nigeria, we are not productive like my brothers there in the studio actually but would have been a better position, because if you look at IMF prediction for Africa, if you look at it now, it was said that Nigeria economy is expected to be better than most Western countries except Spain. So now the challenge is much more of challenge of big economics, because China is having issue. You could see UK, even US have increased their interest rates maybe twice last year. So it's a serious issue. So coming to Nigeria, all we just need to do is to work on our own major problems. So sometimes we look at international issue, we should bring it down and look at our problem, the drivers of our problem. And the drivers of our problem is the purchasing power, and major thing is the security problem. Imagine if by now we have a stable security and people can really farm, because farm is our mainstay, is one of our mainstay, if not the second mainstay of the economy, and employ more people. It would have helped us to really navigate through these challenges, and it's very core. So if you look at that, that's the major issue that we should look at, because if your agriculture is doing well and you can even export some of the produce, it gives you a better opportunity. But by and large, they said 1/3 of the economy is going to, world economy is going to be on recession. Perhaps if it's not even on recession, it's as if they are in a recession. So we are in it together, and we think, while predicting for this year, we said we will continue this trend except Ukraine crisis stop, because it's affecting us. Nigeria is supposed to be benefiting from Ukraine crisis because of our oil and gas, but because we are under subsidy, we are doing subsidy, and apart from subsidy as well, we are not even producing as expected, because our quotas, we cannot even meet it up. So these are the problems. We would have been at a better position at this world crisis, but because of we cannot manage our local produce, we are still on a rentier economy, where most of our things are taken out, like our crude oil are taken out, produce and bring back, and we are meant to pay global price. If we are producing locally and we are meant to pay our local, pay with local conditions, it will be having better. So Nigeria needs to brace up and do more, and our maybe monetary policy, because if you look at Nigerian problem also, it's even beyond their own. Our own is also foreign exchange related problem, because if you have a better foreign exchange, it would have been better. And our mainstay to really compete for foreign exchange. Thank you.
All right. Well, he just raised a point that I actually wanted to talk about. Under normal circumstances, a lot of quarters people believe that we should be making a killing at this point, because it seems like Russia has the world by the jugular. You understand, there are food shortages caused by the current war, energy problems because of lack of oil and gas, and these are things that we actually have, and we should be able to take advantage of this. Is there a way? Do we even realize that we could actually do this? And is there a way we can be able to position ourselves to do this in the future? Because now this ship has sailed.
I don't know if we can still salvage the situation, because what he said is part of what I mentioned, the fact that our productivity level is low. We have a situation where we have been dependent for so long on the Western countries. It's what they give us that we take. As against what you've made reference to, the fact that, look, for instance, look at the crisis with Russia and Ukraine, which you've rightly pointed out to. At a situation where the prices of the crude oil commodity was going up in the international market, the question is, how much impact did that really have for an oil-producing country like Nigeria? We have the resources, but the resources have been so dormant for long. And he made reference to that. Why have they been dormant? Because we are refining some of these products outside. So where we should be getting most of the benefits from it, we are not getting. Instead, the trillions and the billions that we are spending just to get the products which we should be refining locally available for us, we are probably the profits that we should be earning is what we are spending refining the products outside the country. So yes, I think it's not completely bad for us. I mean, like he has pointed out to, but the question is, are we deliberate about certain issues? Are we deliberate about putting certain measures? If our refineries were to be working, for instance, what would have been the capacity at which the refineries would be working? How much are we? Because I was looking at the statistics the other day, and I'm like, in a situation where there was the search for oil, people look for alternatives. If you're not getting oil from Russia and the likes of them, people are looking for alternatives. Where was the place of Nigeria as that alternative point for countries? What was the level of our productivity back then? What is the level of our output? So all of these measures are measures that need to be put in place. What is our economic policy saying? Because he talked about something, he talked about security, for instance. We talked about the fact that one of the reasons why we have recession is because people do not have the means to invest. But when you have the means to invest, where are you bringing in some of those investments? Do we have the right environment that attracts people to say, look, we have monies, we want to develop your market, we want to develop your economy. Can we invest these monies and be sure that our investments are safe and secure? if you do not provide that enabling environment, then you may not get the dividends and the benefits of what you seem to achieve that will be better off for our economy in the long run.
All right. Let me let Tony to chip in here. How much time do we have? I know that you've touched on it, but looking at, you know, this prediction and what we have ahead of us, a general election, how much time do we have to avert this crisis, this further descent into, you know, a recession that we are already feeling? What will it take to, you know, at least redirect certain things in the short possible time?
The truth is, we don't have time. That's just the simple truth. We don't have time. Now, I was going through a whole lot of the indicators, like I was talking about, with which Western countries used to measure recession, right? We have high increased interest rates. We have consumers not being able to buy products. We have the falling GDP. We have the unemployment rate and unemployment claims and the rest of them, and a whole lot of things. I came back to Nigeria and I asked myself, where are all of these indicators? Are they in place? No. The only thing we have in Nigeria that we can use to measure recession is falling GDP. And we experienced that in 2020 when we had 2 quarters consecutively, we have negative GDP, and we said, oh, we're in recession, right? And as well in 2016 as well. So GDP, falling GDP is the only thing that we have to measure if we're in recession or not. After 2020, 2 quarters falling GDP in Nigeria, we've had about 7 or 8 more GDPs as well. But then it were all positive, so we feel we're doing well. The truth is we're not doing well. That's the simple truth, and we don't have time. Election is before us next month. We don't have time. The only salvage we might have is if the next government that will be coming in will be able to recognize this as a problem, like all the things that have been talked about, right? And as well take measures to ensure that these things are in place. Let me just, I get angry. I'm a forex market analyst. So just like he said, there was rising price of crude oil. Crude oil rose from about less than $10 per barrel to about $130 something per barrel. That would have been a very big one for Nigeria, but we were nowhere in the market. Truth is, our Nigerian oil is the second best in the whole of the world. So it simply means that when US was considering to buy oil from any country, when Russia wasn't selling to them, it would have been Nigeria, but we're nowhere on the map. So all of these things are things that the next government that are coming would look critically into it and work towards it. I'm very much happy one of our persons in Nigeria is setting up a refinery now. Hopefully that would also help to salvage the situation in the long run. Right, but so through this, we're not ready.
Just to touch on what you've just made mention now about the next government coming in to probably salvage the situation. A budget was just signed yesterday into law. How much wiggle room does the new government have coming in with the current budget that was signed by by that person and coming into this, facing this particular situation? How much wiggle room does the government have?
That question is very critical. And okay, first let me make reference to something that happened far back as 2016, 2020, when we experienced those 2 recessions in Nigeria. I was going through some of the papers that we had, and I saw when it is written on one of the, I think, Premium Times or something like that, that the president said that we fought our way out of recession by borrowing.
Okay.
I looked a few about the budget that was just recently signed, and more than close to 50% or close to 40% of that budget was to salvage deficits. So it simply means that there is big wahala for the next people that are coming in, and they don't have much legal room, except they would do something very critical about it.
All right. Now, another issue of concern here is the issue of, security, how that is playing a big role. We also had the issue of floods. Yes, the president said that the budget captures certain infrastructures that will be fixed, to do that and all that. So, but these are things that are having major impact on our food production, right? So how do we boost food production in the midst of these circumstances?
Nigeria has a lot of landmass, and it's a pity we're not utilizing it. I think I've been to so many of the states in the north, all right, and I see a lot of landmass. Not only in the north, the middle belt, the south, there is landmass, and we're not doing anything about it. I can tell you the gospel truth that our major problem, it's not really the insecurity that is affecting food production. I can tell you that. If Nigeria wants to handle insecurity as against food, as regards food production, they will do that in a week. And we have all the measures put in place to do that. So I just feel all of these things are more political than it is related to finance.
Okay, so maybe Kule would talk to us about the political dimension.
I actually also, while I agree with him, I also disagree with him. Because yes, insecurity has largely affected food production, whether we like it or not. He made reference to something, the political will to be able to address these issues decisively. Yes, these things are not rocket science, for crying out loud. You need to be able to, because when you talk about food insecurity, that's part of the challenge. For instance, how do you guarantee that people can go to their farms? He talked about something. We have a land mass of a big mass of land, but the question is, are we using it to our advantage? We have food that we can grow locally to solve most of our problems, but rather we'll rather import most of these items. Now, when you cannot give the farmers the sense of assurance that, look, they can go to the farms without their activities being unhindered by some of these criminal elements, the question is, does it encourage them to go to the farm, or does it discourage them from going to the farm? And for us as a country, how does that not get us into a food crisis situation as well? So the political will must be there. It must be seen to be said that, look, people can go about, do their legitimate businesses, and of course, we can benefit from this huge products that comes out of it. It's also going to help us not just locally, but it's also going to help us internationally. So people need to have this sense of belief, because investors too, we want to invest. If you have a blooming food market, for instance, what stops African countries, our neighboring countries, from coming to patronize us? What stops the global market from coming to patronize us? But unfortunately for us, this issue of security, we have not dealt with it as much as we need to. The kind of measures, the kind of security checks.
The people in government will disagree with you anyways. But let me let Elias to talk about this. What can we do really as regards this food? Is it time for the state to take over issue of food production?
All right, thank you so much. The major import substitution. If you recall, import substitution is expected to be solution. For instance, our problem in Nigeria, even our inflation, is food-driven inflation. Remember, during Obasanjo, we have, and our major problem now is from
looks like we have
not having it. But I think that policy somersault, where bread, cassava bread, wheat and bread are increments that inflation. So these are the major things that we need to look at. So if we can look at food substitution, because even as in Nigeria, if you look at that, cassava is abundant. And what is, even in economics, there's what we call comparative advantage. So we must be able to take our comparative advantage to a level of finished goods. By the time we do that, we can feed ourselves. Anything related to that, we can also export. So our major problem is import substitution, and I think is what government can do. Even in a short while, it's just a decision making, and by the time we take it as a Nigerian, by the time you consume at least a year, we will come and will be part of us.
Looks like we have a bad connection there. Yeah. Yes, but you may just if you may add to you know, that issue, that same issue.
Okay, because since we have the same chain of thought, I mean, look, we have so many resources that we are blessed with. You talked about cassava. I know you talked about governors taking charge of this issue of food production. We already have some governors doing that. For instance, the rice pyramid that we saw in one of the states, that's a state taking advantage and ensuring that, look, they are able to boost their productivity level. So we have those resources, we have what it takes. How much investment do some of the state governors put into it?
You know, when I talk about states taking over food production, for the large part of it right now, what we have is peasant farmers working, you know, in the farms and everything. We don't see much of mechanized farming.
Large scale.
Yeah, so that kind of large-scale production, you know, it's what I'm referring to. Is it not something that we can do here?
No, of course, it's something we can do. The question is, are we deploying the right resources into the right places? It's not as if the states do not have the funding to be able to do it. And of course, you talked about the fact that it's only the peasant farmers that are engaged in this. Now, when we have states really deploying their resources and ensuring that there is large-scale farming activity, it even encourages more people to go into agriculture. So we need to get into that advanced stage of mechanized agriculture where we can encourage more people to go into the farm, and at the end of the day, it's going to boost our productivity level on the large scale.
All right. So just to add to what he has just said right now, boosting our productivity on a large scale, is it now that we have the current situation that we have right now, a lot of things are situated at the center. The federal government makes the policies, they make the budget, they do this, they do that. If we bring it down and localize it a bit, just like we talked about something about states being more in charge of their own economies, will that help to actually, you know, insulate some of these states so that we don't have a situation whereby the whole country is in shambles?
Yes, exactly. Let's look at Lagos State. Lagos State, every single day, every single month, they are thinking, how can we manage our resources? How can we manage our state? How can we increase our internally generated revenue? If every state could be like Lagos State, I don't really think that much of the federal government policies that is supposed to affect all of us would really affect us. That is, if many states are supposed to be like Lagos. And the truth is, every state has that capacity. Every single state has that capacity. For me, I just feel many of the states have not really come to the table to sit down and say, okay, how can we? Okay, I wouldn't mention some states, but there are some states that have capacity to do ×5 of what Lagos State is doing. I can tell you that. There are some states in the middle belt that has capacity to do ×10 of Lagos IGRO. But they don't know Kogi alone can do more than 10 times what Lagos is doing. I can tell you that. Abia alone can do ×5 or ×10 of what Lagos is doing. But the truth is that the governments of these states really have not sat down to look at what they have and also how they can utilize it.
Or rather,
until then,
are there bottlenecks that perhaps we are not, you know, seeing? For instance, maybe with the issue of the Land Use Act, the legal framework to be able to, for the states at the subnational level, to be able to take responsibility for certain things.
But the Land Use Act also gives the states control and ownership over some of their land. So that is not the bottleneck. I think the bottleneck that the states themselves have created for themselves is, like, for making reference to what they said, they do not think outside the box. For me, that's the first bottleneck. The second bottleneck that some of the states have is this feeding bottle approach, where for every resources that they need, for every funding that they need, they always have to go to the federal government. And look, when we remember there was a conversation about the poverty level in Nigeria, who is responsible, whether the federal government and the state, and then we had the back and forth between the federal government and the state government. But I dare say that both the federal government and the state government, they are both responsible. Because if, like he made reference to, if states were to develop like Lagos, for instance, that generates billions in IGR, without developing, they have looked inwards and they have said, this is what we have. This is how we can develop what we have. And this is how we can sustain ourselves. If other states have been allowed, they have been, like we say, they've been weaned off that feeding bottle system from the federal government, I think our states will be more productive than they currently are. Look at, there are states like California, for instance. There are states like Los Angeles. There are states like New York. How many times do those states have to run to their to the central government in the USA to depend on their survival? Because they have understood the advantage they have. They've understood the resources they have, whether in terms of people or mineral resources or whatever resources you might, and they've been able to take advantage of, until our governors get out of this lazy approach of doing things the same old way and thinking that infrastructure is just about roads and the likes of them. We will continue to find ourselves in this situation where they cannot provide and sustain themselves wisely the way they should.
All right, now let's take on other issues now. With less than 1 month to the deadline issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria for the return of the old 200 naira, 500 and 1000 naira notes following the currency redesign policy, scarcity of the new naira notes in circulation remains an issue. Some Nigerians are demanding increased awareness on the initiative, especially among market women, rural dwellers and other categories of Nigerians outside the city centers. Now let's take a look at this story now.
With the unveiling of the 3 redesigned denominations.
Weeks after the launch and commencement of circulation of the new banknotes by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the existing currencies remain legal tender and are circulating together until January 31st, 2023, when the existing currencies shall cease to be legal tender. There are worries over the unavailability of the new banknotes, especially at commercial banks, automated teller machine points, point-of-sale operators, and generally in the hands of members of the public at large.
I think it's the first of the CBN, because the CBN, as the mother of all banks, if they have given it out to other commercial banks, why not? They will make it available to their customers. I think it's the fault of the CBN.
Nigerians were a kind of, let me say, very eager to have the money, to get them in their hands. But looking at the very poor process of making it available before the hands of people now makes them discouraged.
I've never seen it. I even went to bank today to withdraw money. They just give me the old notes. So it is not in circulation. I asked them. They said they don't have the new naira notes. So they end up giving us the old one.
With the issue of acceptability hampering the circulation of the new notes, the Apex Bank is urged to intensify awareness to enable end users, especially in the rural areas, come to accept and appreciate the new naira notes.
People need to be properly educated. The level of awareness is poor.
Some people rejected the new naira, all because they don't even know about it. And they have not even heard that there was any plan of the federal government of introducing new naira. So the advertisement about the introduction of the new naira is very, very poor. Sometimes some people see it as a fake naira. So I think acceptability is very, very poor.
The acceptability now is very poor also. As you know, I heard and I read over the news that many people, especially in the rural areas, are no longer now interested even to have or to collect the money.
So there is more sensitization for the people to accept it, and they have to do something to make sure that it's in circulation. If not, they are going to make some people, they are going to make life difficult for people, more especially in the rural areas.
The January 31st deadline is seen by many as not being feasible. The Senate had earlier passed a resolution asking the Apex Bank to extend the January 31st deadline to June 30, 2023 in order to ensure sufficiency and acceptability of the new notes among Nigerians across board. Aisha Salihu, Trust TV News, Abuja.
All right, thanks for staying with us. Thank you, Aisha Salihu, for that report. Now, when this whole initiative was introduced, the policy and everything from Central Bank, a lot of people were excited and optimistic about how it's going to be a game changer in our economy and the rest of them. But where are the Naira notes? Where are the new Naira notes? We can't find them anywhere. It's not in the ATMs, it's not in the banks.
I think I'll just make reference to one of the Nigerian artists who said, if you ask me, who I go ask? Because, I mean, yes, we know that the CBN governor has been under a lot of pressure, whether politically or otherwise. And I said something on one of the platforms, and I said, is this a case of the CBN governor also hiding or being on the run? run, and it's our Naira notes, are they also on the run with our CBN governor? Because it beats my imagination that, just like you were optimistic, I was also optimistic that, I mean, for the first time, coming at a critical period that we are entering, and knowing what we've seen in the past, it appears the CBN may just have brought some moves that could probably sanitize our system and our process, particularly the election season that we are fast entering into. But it's also beginning to look like the aims and the objectives of what the CBN tried to implement with this new Naira design, they're actually defeating their own purpose for which this redesign is taking place. Because you came out, you said, okay, as at November, which means you're talking about 2 months, even though I was skeptical about the time. I remember during the days of Sanusi, when we are going to have the polymer notes, the redesigned old notes that we had coming to the market, there was a lot of sensitization. There was a lot of awareness. And everything fell into place, even when the policy was to kick off. But how much of that, because it appeared there were also loopholes with the planning and the implementation by the CBN. Now, you gave us a timeline, so it should have been expected, except what we are saying is a case of, the CBN waiting for the January 31 deadline, and the new monies will fully be in circulation. But I asked myself, why do you have to wait? I mean, you could start the process gradually, especially when you are trying to phase out the old notes and gradually introduce the new notes into the market so that people can get, used to this currency. But then we know that there has been the political backlash where a lot of people have said, look, this extension you have given to us is not favorable to us. And if it's you are dancing to the tune of the political class, then I think this policy, the CBN may be getting it wrong, because it's because of this political class. I believe that was one of the reasons behind this introduction of this policy. Yes. So why should you dance to their tune when you know that it could have more harm than good if we do not take this decision and sanitize the system of people hoarding monies for one reason or the other, monies that should be in circulation for the good of the people. Probably if these monies were in circulation, the issue of recession that we were talking about, for instance, we probably will not be talking about it. But because some people have deliberately ordered these monies, the economy is not moving as fast as it should move, and it has kept us stagnant. Why don't you release these funds, except you are backtracking and you are saying, okay, by this period, we saw that, the time frame that we have given for the implementation, we cannot meet up. Then why did you come out to give us that policy and give us the timeline, the deadline, if you were not prepared with the infrastructure that would have made the funds available in the markets in circulation?
Talking about the political scene, Tony, some were thinking, okay, this will help the issue of vote buying, but it looks like maybe some other people are getting these new Naira notes through the back channels, and then it will put others at a disadvantage of some sort. It seemed, because what's happening now seems to be feeding into that narrative.
Well, the truth is this. We already heard from CBN that over 2 trillion Naira had been deposited of the old Naira notes. Now, if you're trying to face off the old Naira notes, the best way CBN would have done it is, as more and more of the old Naira notes are being deposited, they are not put back into the system for circulation. All right? So instead, as they are taking the old Naira notes, they are infusing the new Naira notes as replacement. But how come we've had 2 trillion, it should be more than that right now, deposited, and yet we still can't find the new Naira notes? It simply means there is even shortage of supply or shortage of circulation of these Naira notes. What me personally I feel is, of course, we saw a whole lot of videos that were popping up in different states, different locations, people finding 100 million Naira cash, people finding 1 billion Naira cash stocked up. Some of them were even wearing out. So what personally I feel is the elite class or the political class, who perhaps might be involved in some form of hoarding, just like Kunle has said, would most probably want to replace them. And of course, if they have that measures, they will do that. Who would suffer it? It's the commoners.
All right, I understand that we have Aliu Ilyas back virtually now. Let's get his concluding thoughts on this issue. How can we manage this in such a way that it doesn't defeat the whole purpose and then lead us into another dimension of economic crisis?
Right. The fact remains that if you look at the conceptualization of the idea itself, it's faulty because stakeholders need to first and foremost be engaged when such policy is coming up. However, if you look at the Naira note itself, see that it's just mere policy, like people said. It's not in like because there was an interview. CBN said they had little time. That's why they couldn't do major work on the Naira, but just change the color and some features. That's a challenge. And number two is that, remember, even now, if you go to Racketeers, some people still have this new money and they are collecting money over it. How are they getting it? For me, I've not even seen the 200 Naira, and within 3 weeks now, I've been to Kano, I've been to Lagos, I've been to Abuja. These are the major cities. So if you cannot get this cash in these 3 cities, this major cities. So where do we get it? That means people in core areas are not getting. So CBN need to review and change that date. And if you look at it, most of the policy they bring this period, they are two, you see that they bring one, the other one follows without actualizing one, introduce the other one. So I think they don't have choice than to extend this period. But my fear is this: the major aim of this policy is to reduce the hoarding of Naira, to control kidnapping, to also control inflation.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. Unfortunately, time will not allow us to actually fully dissect this issue the way we are supposed to. Thank you very much for joining us on Daybreak, Aliyu Ilyas, this morning, and for your perspectives, and for you gentlemen as well. Thank you very much for joining us and for those insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, this is how we'll wrap it up on Daybreak this morning. Let's do it all again tomorrow. I am Ibrahim Yusuf.
And I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for joining us on Daybreak. Join us again for another time. Don't forget, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube channel. Bye for now.